It's a money fight. I get you. You want to make money. But at some point in time, if you keep telling us that you're taking boxing seriously and you want to be recognized as a big-time boxer/fighter, you're going to have to fight somebody closer to your age who is a contender at the very least.
Jake Paul fight announcement, another circus act, another clown show. A fight between Jake Paul and Gervonta Tank Davis has been announced as an exhibition fight.
A fight that I couldn't believe, that was too insane and honestly just baffling to think would be a real fight in 2025 reminds you that combat sports are the craziest sports on the planet.
Stephen A. Smith didn't mince words about the Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis fight, labeling it a complete circus. He recognized Paul's knack for self-promotion and creating buzz around his bouts, but argued that boxing demands more integrity. Smith emphasized that Paul should take on opponents who are logical matchups instead of prioritizing shock value. To him, this fight underscores entertainment at the expense of genuine.
I've always been a fan of Jake because I think that what Jake tries to do for the sport of boxing, I think people don't realize the importance of him being able to promote for himself and not being reliant on the promoters who I believe has held the sport hostage. The only critique I've ever given Jake, I just want Jake to fight boxers. Like Nate Diaz, we know his reputation. We know the man can fight. We know in the octagon he could be something special. But we know you breathe on him, he starts bleeding.
It's a fair critique. And you know what? He should fight boxers. But then again, should he? Because I'll tell you what, if you're a human who can rake in $6 to $10 million fighting people that you know you're going to beat, and you want to build a resume and a record that's impressive with a good highlight reel, you got to be strategic on this shit. Jake's 25, 26, he's got so much time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I get where you coming from. All I'm saying is, we don't know your skill set because you haven't been in there with anybody really skilled.
Analysts view Jake Paul's latest fight as another spectacle in his boxing career, lacking true competitive merit. They argue his matchups rarely follow logical or balanced criteria, prioritizing publicity over sporting integrity. Rather than facing opponents who align with his style or weight class, Paul opts for unconventional bouts. To many experts, this trend renders his fights entertaining, but far from legitimate boxing contests.
Performance. Jake Paul won the fight. But yeah, that was that. This time, Jake Paul is to take on Tank Davis. Tank Davis, he was recently in the news for being arrested for a domestic violence incident involving one of his kids' mother. He was alleged to have slapped her about the place. The charges were later dropped, to be fair to him. But yeah, that was when he was last in the news. What is interesting is just a couple of months ago, Tank Davis was saying openly that he lost his passion for boxing and that he wanted time away from the sport. There was speculation that he might even retire as he was experiencing extreme mental fatigue from boxing, depression, and there were mental health concerns over him. However, I guess the opportunity to earn a truck full of money fighting a completely worthless exhibition fight against Jake Paul was enough to make him change his mind about boxing. Funny that, isn't it? But you know what? I'm not even going to waste your time or mine critiquing this utter nonsense. Suffice to say that this so-called fight we're talking about is an exhibition, and it pits Jake Paul, who is a cruiserweight, by the way, weighs in excess of 200 pounds, and Tank Davis, who is, he was the WBA lightweight champion, who weighs in at about 135 pounds when he fights. So that's a disparity of some 65 pounds. In old money, that's about 4.5 stone. There's also a significant difference in height. Jake Paul is roughly, 6'1", 2. Gervonta Davis is 5'5" at best. So, there's a height disparity there of some 8 inches.
Ring Magazine announced shocking news that set the boxing world ablaze. Jake Paul will face Gervonta Tank Davis in an exhibition bout on November 14th at State Farm Arena in Atlanta. Streaming live on Netflix per Mike Carpenter's sources, negotiations for a Paul Anthony Joshua fight fell apart due to network disputes, with Paul's last fight at 200 pounds and Davis reigning as a 135-pound champion. This matchup sparks heated debates over size disparities, entertainment value, and boxing's unpredictable twists, Jake Paul continues to carve his own path in the sport, fueling his ambitious vision with personal investment and unmatched hype. While critics call his approach unconventional, supporters argue his financial clout draws fresh attention and new fans to boxing. This improbable fight
But again, if it makes dollars, it makes sense, and we've seen that Jake will kind of bounce in between doing these entertainment fights and then, trying to push toward his goal of ingraining himself in the sport of boxing, and kind of does both of them. So it's kind of a weird place to be, because he wants the respect of the boxing fans and the boxing hierarchy and hardcore boxing people, but at the same time, he'll gain some of that and then lose some of it. It's like a seesaw of his fights. Like one fight, like, okay, that's a real fight, or that's a real fight. He'll go and he'll win the fight. Julio Cesar Chavez, real fighter, maybe past his prime, whatever, but Jake goes and wins that fight pretty easily, and then gets a lot of respect, gets a lot of the boxing hardcore love, and you have these talks about him fighting Anthony Joshua, and that was going to get even more respect. More people were like, that's fucking crazy. What are you doing? Myself included. That seemed like a massive risk, but a lot of people were like, okay, fair play. Anthony Joshua, that's a real heavyweight. Jake wants to fight him. He's a psycho, but fair play. And then you announce this one, and it's like, well, that's the same thing people have been saying about Jake for years. So it's a weird spot to be in for him, for sure. But I talked about this not being the first choice, and I don't think it was, because Coppinger reports next that talks for Jake Paul to face Anthony Joshua collapsed over network issues. Now, we had all heard the talks, and they were pretty public. From Eddie Hearn, from Jake, Nikisa Vidarian, Jake's manager, was over in the UK on, I think, Sky Sports, talking about the fight and saying how it was a real possibility and they were really starting to work on it. And now Mike Coppinger says that the talks for Jake and Joshua fell apart over broadcasting issues.
Jake Paul took to Instagram to confirm his upcoming bout, stating, "Size meets speed, power meets precision. One will stand tall, one will fall in Atlanta," streaming worldwide on Netflix Friday, November 14th. The post sparked widespread excitement, cementing the exhibition as a global talking point. Esteemed boxing analyst Teddy Atlas has openly discussed Paul's remarkable rise, asserting that despite detractors, Paul deserves recognition for landing the fights he targets. Atlas notes that such achievements require unwavering determination, substantial investment, and a readiness to forego stability for prominence. Paul, once a YouTuber, has forged an improbable niche in boxing. Atlas also praises Paul's tangible progress, developed through years of training under top coaches and sparring with seasoned pros. Though purists may deride him,
that I gave too much credit to Paul. Why? He's done a hell of a job to put himself in this position. He sold himself. He sold his dream. He took his dream. He took his idea. And he put it out there, and he made it happen. Give him credit for that. He made it happen. And he took risk along the way. Yeah, he picked his spots. He's in the driver's seat. He gets to pick his spots. He's the one bringing the money. He's the one promoting. Yeah, he's the name. He made himself that, coming from where he came from, with all his followers and the whole thing, and just the uniqueness of what he was doing. But he has learned along the way. He's not a top guy yet. No, I don't know that he ever will be. He didn't have that amateur background, the things that you usually need to be a top guy. But he has improved. He is a work in progress. He is a guy that we got to give him credit that he's respected the sport. He went out there, he worked hard at it, and he's gotten himself into this position. Having said all of that, this might be a step too far. Now, when I say it, I'm also, I try to be responsible. I've been in this game 50 years, so I know where not to step, where you could twist an ankle, or worse, you could break a leg or fall down. When I say that with the understanding, too, that Joshua's coming off being knocked out.
The team at TalkSports reacted strongly to the news of Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis, branding it a completely unbalanced matchup. Their main point of concern is the massive weight disparity. Davis, a natural 135 lb lightweight, has dominated his division with knockout power. But stepping up against Paul, who walks around at 195 lb, seems unrealistic to them. The question arises, how can this be a fair or meaningful fight when the size difference is so extreme? This reaction highlights a recurring criticism of Paul's fight selection. Many argue that he chooses opponents who are either much smaller,
Netflix, and that's probably where the problem was. So I think that fight is sort of like dead and buried in the water. And we get Gervonta Davis, man, like you guys said it. He's a 135-pound world champion, lightweight world champion. The guy's my height. He's 5'5", and Jake Paul is a cruiserweight. You know, he walks around at sort of like 15 stone. So, and it's an exhibition. So look, if you buy into that, then yeah, fine. But it's not one for me.
Spence, let me ask you this: if you were European champion, right?
Yes.
Before you had to retire, so that you were European champion. If you were, how tall are you? What are you at? 4'8", 4'9"?
5'5".
5'5". Okay. If you were in your pomp at European champion and you were 5'5" and you were fighting Jake Paul, would you fancy your chances?
Absolutely. I think, definitely. I think I fancy my chances. I think Gervonta Davis actually beats him as well. He's one of the pound-for-pound best fighters in the world at lightweight. But it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? It's like you've got a guy of 5'5" boxing, a guy of 6 foot plus. Cruiserweight. Yeah, it's just all a little bit odd. I feel if they're going to do an exhibition, perhaps Jake should have picked someone more his size. Look, his last fight against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Was at cruiserweight. Chavez Jr. was a former world champion at middleweight himself, and that sort of made sense. And it was a good win for Jake Paul. You know, he come out there and he beats an ex-world champion. He gets a little bit of credibility, and you go, right, now you're heading in the right direction.